This lemon sucker here, he's the most suspicious of the bunch.
Before anyone learned to love him as the West's most unforgettable rascal, he was William Scott Elam, born November 13, 1920, in Miami, Arizona, a copper town ringed by hard hills and harder luck. He grew up with stories in his bones and dust in his throat, a kid who watched men measure one another with a glance later. That glance would become currency. The peculiar off-kilter eye that fate handed him in youth became the calling card of Jack Elam, an actor who could freeze a room with a stare and then melt it with a lopsided grin. War came, and with it, discipline, the kind that carves a man's habits in stone. After service and studies that sharpened his sense of craft and responsibility, he drifted toward the world that had always whispered to him, show business, not the silk-lapelled version, at least not at first, the one built of payroll ledgers, promises, and long days that end under hot lights. He learned the town's rhythms from the back office and then, slowly, stubbornly, stepped in front of the camera. Hollywood was crowded with handsome heroes. Jack didn't need to be one. That errant eye, misaligned by mischance, gave him the look of trouble's favorite uncle. He didn't fight it. He framed it. He made it poetry. If some actors asked the audience to adore them, Jack asked us to notice him, and then let us discover what else was hiding in that crooked, endearing face. Humor, slyness, a touch of sadness, and a surprising sweetness he offered only to characters who had earned it. The West finds its rascal. The Western was his natural habitat, wide skies, stark choices, moral weather that could change without warning. Jack Elam fit there like a spur in a boot heel, in The Night of the Grizzly, 1966, and Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. He was the man you'd cross a street to avoid and then cross back to hear talk and support your local sheriff. Support your 1969. He bent villainy into comedy until the bad guy felt like a cousin who just remembered his manners. Audiences loved that trick. Menace turned into mischief with a shrug and a wink. He was a study in contradictions, capable of looking murderous and then somehow against your better judgment, making you feel protective of him. Directors learned to write around that gift. Give Elam the knife, but also the punchline. Let him crack a safe and a smile. Allow him, every once in a blue moon, to tell the truth about a scoundrel's lonely heart. That's why, decades later, even a brief appearance could steal the whole scene. He'd stroll through a shot like a dust devil and leave the place rearranged. Beyond the Saddlejack wasn't just the West's favorite rascal. He was a working actor in the purest sense, more than 200 roles across film and television, a resume that reads like a secret map of mid-century American pop. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, The Lone Ranger, The Twilight Zone. If a series needed a face the audience would never forget, they called Jack, he obliged, and then some. In 1974-75, he did something unexpected. The Texas Wheelers on ABC, a short-lived comedy with a long afterglow. As Zach Wheeler, a wayward father shouldering responsibility far too late, he found a gentleness under the grime. The show barely lasted 8 episodes, but the aftershocks were wild. It paired Elam with newcomers Mark Hamill and Gary Busey, both rockets waiting to launch. Ratings didn't love the series. Critics loved Jack. They saw a clown with a poet's pulse, rough edges warmed by a stubborn love for his kids, a laugh that kept regret at bay. He kept leaning into the strange. In 1979, he played Frankenstein's monster in CBS's Struck by Lightning, a high-concept sitcom that lasted 3 episodes stateside. British TV aired all 11 the next year. It shouldn't have worked, an icon of horror stitched to a laugh track, but with Elam's offbeat charm, it became one of those delightful curios that fans trade like secrets. He could even wander into a modern family comedy without losing his edge. On Home Improvement, Season 1's Birds of a Feather Flock to Taylor. He bantered across generations, proving that the same eyes that once haunted a High Plains showdown could also twinkle over a suburban tool bench. Cannonballs and Odd Encounters. The movies kept finding him because he kept finding the fun. In The Cannonball Run, 1981, directed by Hal Needham and bursting with stars, Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, Farrah Fawcett. Elam turned up as Dr. Nicholas Van Helsing, a self-described crazed proctologist. It sounds like a throwaway. It wasn't. He stole every scrap of screen he touched, a wild-eyed saint of chaos. Audiences demanded an encore. He obliged in Cannonball Run 2, 1984, doubling down on the gleeful oddity of a man who made eccentricity feel like a birthright. Then came something tender and strange. The Aurora Encounter, 1986, a weird western that blended saloons with star lore. On set, Elam met Mickey Hayes, an 11-year-old Texan living with progeria, a rare condition that accelerates aging. What grew between them was beyond publicity, an unlikely friendship that moved like weather across everyone who witnessed it. Their bond was later chronicled in I Am Not a Freak, 1987, a title that doubled as a sermon. The people we think of as curiosities often carry the most luminous souls. Elam, whose screen life had taught him to make spectacle out of difference, recognized something truer here. Compassion with its sleeves rolled up. He also paired beautifully with glamour and grit in Easy Street, 1986-87. Playing Alvin Bully Stevenson, a down-on-his-luck uncle crashing in his socialite niece's mansion, that niece played by Lonnie Anderson. Q-class clash. Cues for laughter. Elam mined the role for humanity, a shambling bear who knew he was lucky to be warm. And in 1988, he saddled up with Willie Nelson and Delta Burke for the TV Western Where the Hell's That Gold, a caper cut with twinkle. As if everyone on screen knew they were legacy acts showing the kids how to have a good time. A haul for the hustlers. By 1994, the people who keep the country's myths had their say. Jack Elam was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. That's not just an honor roll. It's a vote that says, "This face belongs to the landscape." The plaque might as well have read, "For services rendered to the art of looking both dangerous and dear." Oti, a fierce opinion, told in a low-voiced nostalgia can blur the edges, so let's keep one sharp. Jack Elam was a gentleman to crews and day players, the kind of colleague who remembered names and shared the shade. But he was also blunt, a man who felt the industry, at times, misunderstood its own heroes. Among the stories that followed him like campfire smoke was a fierce opinion about one of Hollywood's most sanctified figures, Gary Cooper. Cooper, for many, was the ideal, stoic grace, the quiet thunder of a man who speaks with his presence. Elam, by several accounts and campfire retellings, didn't buy the gospel in his gruff, unhurried way. He'd grumble that the naturalness celebrated in Cooper often looked, to him, like coasting, murmured lines, posture doing the heavy lifting while character actors sweated through the scene. He reportedly railed against what he saw as a system that lionized leading men for standing tall while the supporting players carried the story's weight. About High Noon and its accolades, the legend goes, he could be cutting. Awards follow aura. Hard work isn't always photogenic. Are these quotes exact? Memory's a trickster. What matters is the truth of the feeling. Elam was a craftsman who believed effort should show, not as strain, but as specifics. He loved actors who pushed themselves, who rehearsed, who respected the ensemble. If you were a studio boss or a marquee name, perhaps you got Gary Cooper, the gentleman. If you were a character man in the trenches, Elam's telling suggests, you didn't always get a handshake. He couldn't forgive that. In his worldview, the West and Hollywood runs on mutual respect. Anyone who withheld it earned his everlasting side-eye. You don't have to agree with him to appreciate the integrity inside the complaint. Jack Elam's entire career was an argument on behalf of the indispensable middle, the odd faces, the cracked voices, the men and women who round out a world so that the star's silhouette makes sense. Remove them, and even the handsomest hero is just a hat on a horizon, a private life, steadily kept for a man who played wolves and wild men. Jack kept his private life with astonishing tenderness. He married Jean Louise Hodgert in 1937. They stayed together until cancer took her on January 24, 1961. In August of the same year, he married Margaret M. Jennison. That union lasted 42 years, a love sturdy enough to outlast fads, fashions, and most of the people who thought they knew him. He died October 20th, 2003 of congestive heart failure, at home in Ashland, Oregon, the kind of ending cowboys rarely get. Quiet, held, earned, the face we won't forget. When you conjure Jack Elam, the first image is always the eye, that delicious, disobedient eye that told the audience where the danger was, and then told them it would be fun. But stay on the picture a moment longer, and you'll notice other things. The careful hands, the musical rhythm of his line readings, and the way he could aim a tiny reaction and nail a laugh as surely as a gunslinger nails a tin can. He made villains human and weirdos beloved. And when the work asked him to be tender, he didn't blink, or rather, he blinked in a way that broke your heart. He understood that comedy is simply tragedy that found its timing. That's why he wore both so well. The West has a long memory, so does Hollywood. When it chooses, in both, Jack Elam is still riding, crooked smile, straight spirit, proof that a life can be as ragged as a saddle blanket and still warm everyone who sits near it.